Hello, children. It's been a while, but we're back. Today we're going to be talking about how to prepare for presentations because that's a skill that we have been working slowly on, and now you're going to be assessed specifically on how well you can pull off a good formal presentation. Uh, as always, these are required notes, so make sure that you have them ready on the day that I will be checking them. And they should be quick. They shouldn't take too long, so at least there's that for you. So if you want to have a great presentation, which you should, because that's what we're working on, there are basically three elements that you have to put into that great presentation. You need to put your knowledge into that presentation. You need to make sure that that presentation is structured correctly or appropriately. And then, of course, you need to make sure that you've prepared adequately so that your presentation goes off without a hitch. The way that this can help is with our focus standard, which is to learn to use oral communication skills such as eye contact, pacing, command of formal English, and domain-specific vocabulary in order to demonstrate a knowledge of the subject. And we're going to be talking a little bit today, well, about all three, but this should overall help you with your oral communication skills. So let's start with knowledge, because I know that it's not specifically related. You may not think that it's specifically related to oral communication, but if you're going to communicate anything, you need to know about that thing first. So when we talk about knowledge and preparing your knowledge for a presentation, we're talking about a few things. We're talking about how do you know your topic, and what that means is you need to know more than you plan on presenting. If you only know what you're planning on presenting, it's going to be obvious that if I were to ask you a question, your knowledge is only paper thin. And so you have to give the sense that you know more than you're saying. You need to know your domain-specific vocabulary. So that's the vocabulary that comes up as you're preparing your presentation. Sometimes you're doing some research and you come across an idea and you think to yourself, well, or a word, and you think, gosh, I don't know what that means, and you have to look it up and you have to know what it is. You have to know how to say it. And that's part of showing that you know more than you're presenting. If you use words that you obviously don't understand just because you read them in your research, it's going to be clear that you don't know what you're talking about in your subject. And so you have to know the words that go along with your subject. You have to know what those words mean. You have to know how to pronounce those words. And even if you never ever address the word beyond saying it, it should portray to your audience that you know what the word is, and you could explain it if you needed to. You should anticipate questions and possible answers, and that's also going to help you know more than you plan on presenting. So you should go through your presentation and you should think, well, if somebody, like the teacher, was going to ask me a question, where might those questions come up? And what would my answers be to those questions? And if you don't get asked those questions, how lucky are you? But if you do, you have the knowledge to draw upon so that you can answer them. And it's clear that you know what you're talking about. And then the last thing that will help with knowledge is remembering that your notes for your presentation are an aid, not a crutch. What I mean by that is you should not be leaning on your notes as the only thing that's keeping you from being able to present and not. You should know your topic well enough that if your notes were to be taken away from you, you could still give a pretty good presentation on your topic. So remember that in that vein, when you have notes, you should still be speaking to the audience. You should not be speaking to your notes. You should not be reading from your notes. Your notes are just there to kind of give you the support that you need if you have a momentary brain lapse or something like that. You should be making eye contact with your audience because it shows that you are then not so dependent upon your notes that you can't be bothered to pay attention to the people who are sitting in front of you. The people who are sitting in front of you want to know that they have a reason to listen to you. And making eye contact with them and showing them that you know your topic well enough that you don't have to be reading from notes is one way to do that. Another thing you can do is vary your voice inflection. That's a hard thing to do if you don't know what you're going to talk about. If it's clear that you're reading from your notes, and it sounds like you're reading from your notes for the very first time, then you're going to have that really flat inflection. But if it's clear that you've practiced and you know what you're talking about, you're going to be able to speak more naturally to your audience. And then lastly, you need to be enthusiastic about it. This is something that teachers are guilty of not doing a lot, but, or at least you perceive us as not being enthusiastic. But if it's not the most exciting thing in the world, you've got to pretend like it is, because otherwise the audience isn't gonna come along. The next part of your presentation is the structure of your presentation. Being prepared is knowing the structure of your presentation. And for this, you need to remember the basics. That even though you're not writing a paper at this point, or maybe you're not even making an argument, the structure of how we present information remains the same. And so you need to make sure that you have a claim, that you provide evidence for your claim, that you elaborate upon your claim, and that you conclude or connect your claim to the real world. The presentation should feel to the audience like they're discovering something along with you. That as you're taking them through your claim and evidence and elaboration and conclusion, they're on this journey, and having gone through that journey, when they come out the other side, they'll be better for it, and that they'll be able to apply that knowledge to their lives. The other part of a presentation is that often you have a visual aid, and your visual aid needs to have it needs to be designed structurally so that it's helping it's helping your presentation as well. So make sure that your visual aid is clean, that it's not messy, that it doesn't have needless mistakes in it. Make sure that your visual aid is straightforward, that by looking at the visual aid we're not so confused by it that we can't pay attention to what you're saying. It should be an aid. Remember, it's not standing in for information. It's just enhancing the information. So being clean and straightforward is going to help enhance that information as you're taking us through that journey of discovery. It should also be consistent. You shouldn't have one purple slide and one gold slide and one magenta slide, and you shouldn't have 7 different font colors or anything like that. It should consistently be part of that journey. So, for example, the slideshow that you're watching, it all has a very consistent design, so that the design kind of fades into the background, and it's just there to enhance the thing that you're saying rather than to stand in for the thing that you're saying. And then the last thing is it should be few words. Notice that on this particular presentation, there's not a lot written on the screen. It's just enough for me to know what I need to say to you. And that goes along with what I was saying about notes on the previous slide. But it's worth repeating that a well-structured visual aid, a well-designed visual aid, is not going to have a lot of words, because you're going to know more than what goes up on the screen, and you're going to say those things to us in an interesting way. The last part of having a great presentation or preparing for a great presentation is the actual physical preparation part. Knowledge and structure are part of preparation, but in this case for preparation we're talking specifically about what do you do before you get up in front of the class to give that presentation. The biggest thing that you can do is to practice out loud. Obviously that can take, if you write a script, that means memorizing the script and being able to deliver the script. But sometimes you're just giving a presentation that shows that you understand and that you're able to talk in a knowledgeable way about your topic. Whichever you choose, you need to have practiced out loud. You need to know how it's going to feel when it comes out of your mouth. So make sure that you're speaking confidently and audible. The way to do that is to make sure that you have said the things before, and the first time you're saying them is not when you get up to give the presentation. Make sure, again, that you're making eye contact. If you've practiced out loud and you've said these things and you know what you're going to say, it's going to be much easier to look away from your notes, to look away from your visual aid and to look at your audience. And then obviously, if you're going to practice out loud, you're going to need to plan it out. And so planning it out doesn't just mean planning what you're going to say, but how you're going to come off to the audience. And a big way of that is dressing appropriately. I recommend for a big formal presentation that you dress in business casual or semi-formal, that you're not coming in, torn up clothes that show off a little too much skin, but that you actually look professional to your audience so they take you seriously. And that you know how you're going to use your body, which means that you have practiced being up in front of people, and you know what you're going to do with your hands, and you know where you're going to stand and where you're going to move if you're going to move, so that you don't end up doing a dance, and so that you don't end up facing the wall and talking to the wall. This is all stuff that requires you to prepare beforehand, and hopefully prepare with an audience beforehand. Those things, you should be able to have a really good presentation, but it obviously does require preparation. So in your reflection at the end of your notes, you can answer these questions. What 3 pieces of advice will be the most difficult for you to accomplish, and how will you overcome them? Because a lot of people read these pieces of advice and they say, well, that's too much work, or I don't know how to do that, so I'm not going to do it. I'd rather that you decided, wow, that's actually a lot of work, but I'm going to do it, and this is where my challenges will lie, and this is how I will overcome them. With that said, have an excellent night, and I will see you with your notes on the assigned day.